to another episode of The Suited Shootist. And this week in the Being Basic series, we're going to be talking about the being basics of a communicator. And just like with the rest of the series, it's really just focusing on a couple of fundamental concepts that gives you something that's very workable to kind of tweak and play with and see if it's something that can help improve things and make your life easier in a varied number of facets. Obviously, something like communicating, talking with people is something that we hopefully are doing a whole lot more regularly than getting in fist fights or getting in gunfights. So arguably, it's going to be a much more useful skill to master. And like with everything else, I'm going to keep it to kind of three basic principles. The first one is going to be Craig Douglas likes to call it verbal agility. If you've ever taken his coursework, or if you've heard anybody talk about it, it's just being able to navigate through a situation without getting hung up, without just getting stuck in place, whether it's physically or whether it's just dynamically within the conversation. And there's a lot of value to that because we've all heard of the kind of the cliche that public speaking is the number one fear that most people have. It ranks higher than even death. And you got to figure that most people, when they're thinking about that public speaking, it's in a controlled environment. You know, they're talking about something like a banquet speech or, a thesis defense or something like that, where, it's important for sure, but on the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively consequence-free environment that nothing earth-shattering is going to happen if you screw that up. And even in that most forgiving of environments, public speaking is still the number one fear that people have. So how do you think that's going to translate to some, street rat motherfucking you and calling you all sorts of names and everything else, and you don't know how to deal with that? Worst case scenario, it can escalate all the way to a violent confrontation. It could possibly make you look more like prey than you actually are and initiate a conflict that maybe didn't need to happen. So that verbal agility piece is really important to focus on, because if you're able to be dynamic enough in the conversation, then it will potentially allow you to redirect or to just have better control of the whole circumstance. And that way you're able to better dictate how things go. So the verbal agility piece is really critical, not to mention the fact that it's just incredibly handy to have socially, not only in a professional standpoint where you might find yourself in a circumstance that you're unfamiliar with, but you can still kind of hold your own without looking foolish, but even socially, whether it's just being able to not be kind of the quiet creeper off in a corner at a cocktail party, or, if you're verbally agile enough, you can snap off some pretty solid zingers if you're just ball busting with friends. It can be fun. So figure out a way to kind of incorporate it in a manner that's useful to you. So figure, witty shit talking still counts as this kind of thing. It's not all, the buttoned up presentations of, like Ben Stein droning on and on about some boring topic. The other reason why the communication aspect of it is so critical is just the understanding of, and this is going to sound weird, but stick with me, how words work. Aaron Cowan is fond of saying words mean things. And you figure a word selection is going to evoke a certain response from another person. And that can either be desired or undesirable. So a great example of this is, let's say you're talking about a potential assault. You've got somebody, say, at gunpoint, or maybe it hasn't even gotten to that level yet, but you feel like it might be going there. A great combination as a bad example is, don't move, show me your hands. I mean, those are two completely contradictory things. And you got to figure if they're doing one and not the other, the last command is telling them to move. So you may end up, again, escalating it to a degree that it didn't necessarily need to go. Masad Ayub talks about this in great detail in his Mag 20 and Mag 40 classes. So I absolutely recommend checking that out if you ever have the opportunity to. It is well worth the cost of admission. And to my understanding, this is also something that Craig talks about in his armed movement instructions class. That's one that I haven't taken yet, so I can't speak directly to it. However, there are some videos of evolutions online that kind of give that indication. The third reason why the communication piece is, I think, incredibly valuable is, would you rather get in a fight with somebody who's actively resisting you? Or would you rather get in a fight with somebody that doesn't know that they're in a fight? For me, that's a pretty simple answer. I'd rather be in the fight with somebody that doesn't know they're fighting, because at that point, I've got all the advantage. So if I could show you a way to be able to engage an opponent and come up against minimal resistance and get to the end result that you're looking for, possibly even with their help, isn't that something that you might be interested in? That's what I'm talking about here, because it's that combination of everything. The verbal agility with the properly selected verbiage, you're going to be able to get to your desired end state with minimal resistance, because whether it's a business deal, whether you're trying to de-escalate domestic friction between yourself and a significant other, or something to that effect, it's a whole lot easier if the other person isn't all jacked up and ready to fight. So, I mean, if that's your thing, you just enjoy kind of, ramming horns with somebody else because that's your form of recreation, I mean, cool, go for it. That's some people's thing, but when you think about it, it works in combatives. There's no sense in just trading punches with somebody in this kind of war of attrition to see who drops first. There's always some strategy to it, whether it's jujitsu, whether it's boxing, whether it's MMA. It's not just unbridled brute force. There is still a game plan and a finesse to it. So why should talking be any different? Now, yeah, it's more challenging because there's not necessarily immediate feedback that you can get, but there are tons of resources out there that can help you hone the skill set. Two books that I have found immensely helpful are How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it's something that I think everybody should read. If nothing else, it's just kind of a good primer on how to be a little bit less of a jackass, which everybody could benefit from, myself included. The other one is Verbal Judo, and I'm going to link to both of those down below, but I really definitely think that you should check them out. None of them are particularly expensive, and the variety of arenas that you can find this stuff applicable is going to be leaps and bounds beyond empty hand skills or what your build drill time is, or even your medical skills. So this is something that a lot of people like to dismiss because it's not particularly fun. It's not particularly sexy. You don't have some shiny new piece of gear that you can show off to your friends. And there's really no way to buy this solution. Unlike buying the new Wonder Blaster 3000 that might make up for lousy trigger pull or whatever else. There's no way around this one. You just got to do the work. So I think it's definitely something worth focusing on, especially since it's something that we do every day. And there's enough hours logged that you can absolutely get better at it. So check it out. Tell me what you think. And down in the comments, let me know what your favorite verbal tactics are. I think it'd be a fun little experiment. So go ahead and throw them down there. and like, subscribe. If there's anything else that you think that you'd like to see, I always love that feedback as well. So I hope everybody has a great week, and I'll catch you next time.